with the life of David. He's a shepherd boy, giant killer, the king of Israel, the sweet psalmist, a man after God's own heart. And the choices that he made, both good and bad. Then let's turn that magnifying glass that we're going to open today around onto us in our own lives. Look deep in our past, in our present, and how do our choices that we make now, how have they affected us? And how do they look under scrutiny? This morning, let's look at the life of David and hopefully glean some insight on how to make good choices and possibly repair some of the bad choices that we made. So, to start, let's jump ahead a little bit. Let's turn to Psalm 3. Psalm 3. That's where we'll start this morning. Beginning in verse 1 of Psalm 3. O Lord, how my adversaries have increased. Many are rising up against me. Many are saying of my soul, there is no deliverance for him in God. But you, O Lord, are a shield about me, my glory and the one who lifts my head. I was crying to the Lord with my voice, and he answered me from his holy mountain. I lay down and slept. I awoke, for the Lord sustains me. I will not be afraid of 10,000 of people who have set themselves against me round about. Arise, O Lord, save me, O my God. For you have smitten all my enemies on the cheek. You have shattered the teeth of the wicked. Salvation belongs to the Lord. Your blessing be upon your people. Poor choices have led David into this trouble that he's talking about right now. And it's a good indicator, though, that his faith, he still upholds that God is there for him, no matter what's happening about him. Even if the people have the impression that God has given up on him. But he still has to suffer the consequences of the decisions that he makes. I started here because I want us to see that in times of trouble and poor choices, the first place we should go is run to God, not away from it. So many times we see people that want to know why God has let this happen to me. Why did God let this happen in my family? God didn't let it happen. It was your choice, or choices of others that affected you. Now, like some TV shows or movies that we see, let's rewind to 20 years earlier. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, David's now king over all of the kingdom, 2 Samuel chapter 4, or chapter 5. He went on to have successful campaigns against the Philistines, with one quick caveat on that he rescued the Ark of the Covenant by going and transporting it in a way that wasn't commanded by God. And Uzzah paid the price for that. That was a poor choice on David. He triumphed over several kingdoms, including the Arameans, where in 2 Samuel 8, verse 13, it tells us that he killed 18,000 of them in the Valley of Salt. And again in 2 Samuel chapter 10, he killed 700 charioteers and 40,000 horsemen. So by the end of chapter 10, things are going pretty well for David. He has established his kingdom. He's made a name for himself in all the nations round about him. He has peace treaties with several nations. And then we get to chapter 11. Turn there if you would. 2 Samuel chapter 11. Now this is a lengthy reading, but I think it points to us, and it's the turning point and the major bad choice in David's life. 2 Samuel chapter 11. This is the New American Standard, if it sounds a little bit different than yours. Then it happened in the spring, at the time when the king goes out to battle, that David sent Joab and his servants with him and all Israel, and they destroyed the sons of Ammon and besieged Rabbah. But David stayed at Jerusalem. Now, when evening came, David arose from his bed and walked around on the roof of the king's house. And from the roof he saw a woman bathing, and the woman was very beautiful in appearance. So David sent and inquired about the woman, and one said, "Is this not Bathsheba, the daughter of Elam, the wife of Uriah the Hittite?" David sent messengers and took her. And when she came to him, he lay with her. And when she had purified herself from the uncleanness, she returned to her house. The woman conceived, and she sent and told David and said, "I am pregnant." Then David sent to Joab, saying, "Send me Uriah the Hittite." So Joab sent Uriah to David. So this begins the cover-up, or attempted cover-up. When Uriah came to him, David asked concerning the welfare of Joab and the people and the state of the war. Then David said to Uriah, "Go down to your house and wash your feet." And Uriah went out of the king's house, and a present from the king was sent out after him. But Uriah slept at the door of the king's house with all the servants of his lord, and did not go down to his house. Now when they told David, saying, "Uriah did not go down to his house," David said to Uriah, "Have you not come from a journey? Why did you not go down to your house?" Uriah said to David, "The ark and Israel and Judah are staying in temporary shelters, and my lord Joab and the servants of my lord are camping in the open field. Shall I then go to my house to eat and drink and to lie with my wife? By your life and the life of your soul, I will not do this thing." Then David said to Uriah, "Stay here today also, and tomorrow I will let you go." So Uriah remained in Jerusalem that day and the next. Now David called him, and he ate and drank before him, and he made him drunk. And in the evening he went out to lie on his bed with his lord's servants, but he did not go down to his house. Now in the morning David wrote a letter to Joab, sent it by the hand of Uriah. He had written in the letter, saying, "Place Uriah in the front of the fiercest battle and withdraw from him, so that he may be struck down and die." So it was as Joab kept watch on the city that he put Uriah at the place where he knew there was valiant men. The men of the city went out and fought against Joab, and some of the people among David's servants fell. And Uriah the Hittite also died. Then Joab sent and reported to David all the events of the war. He charged the messengers, saying, "When you have finished telling all the events of the war to the king, and it happens that the king's wrath rises, and he says to you, 'Why did you go so near the city to fight? Do you not know that they would shoot from the wall? Who struck down Abimelech, the son of Jerubbethim? But did not a woman throw an upper millstone on him from the wall, so that he died at Thebez? Why did you go so near the wall? Then you shall say, Your servant Uriah the Hittite is dead also.'" So the messenger departed and came and reported to David all that Joab had sent to him to tell. The messenger said to David, "The men prevailed against us and came out against us in the field, but we pressed them as far as the entrance to the gate. Moreover, the archers shot at your servants from the wall, so some of the king's servants are dead, and your servant Uriah the Hittite is also dead." Then David said to the messenger, "Thus you shall say to Joab, Do not let this thing displease you, for the sword devours one as well as another. Make your battle against the city stronger and overthrow it, and so encourage him." Now when the wife of Uriah heard that Uriah her husband was dead, she mourned for her husband. When the time of mourning was over, David sent and brought her to his house, and she became his wife. Then she bore him a son, but the thing that David had done was evil in the sight of the Lord. So he saw this woman from the rooftop, and instead of turning away, he lusted after her and wanted her, even though he knew she was another man's wife. Maybe he thought no one would know. If she'd have gone back and had not become pregnant, then maybe no one would have known. But she ended up pregnant, and that began this cover-up. And how sad it is when you read that story that Uriah's respect for men and his commander and God led to his death because he would not go down to his house. And that he carried the letter for his death sentence by his own hand. After the period of mourning, David took Bathsheba into the palace to be his wife, more than likely thinking, okay, that's done. Everything's good now. I've covered up everything. In chapter 12, we have noticed that God knew, of course, and that David was guilty. After a story about a little ewe lamb that riled up the anger of David, Nathan the prophet, in verses 5 and 6, he states the judgment upon that man. David says that he's going to give fourfold, and that man should surely die. In verse 7, the prophet Nathan looks David straight in the eye and says, "You are the man." Did David deny it? No, he knew exactly what was going on. God goes on to say that I appointed you as king. I delivered you from Saul. If anything you wanted was too little, I would have given you more. But you have done this thing against me. You have despised the Lord by doing evil. So the sword will never depart from your house. I will raise up evil against you from your own house. Your wives will be taken and given to your companion. This is the large print edition. The death of Uriah was the consequence of his action. The death of the baby is the second. Yes, okay, sorry. This is what you get when you print on the wrong font, but it's good because I can't see well anyway. But so these things come about because of David's choice. What greatness could have come out of David's physical family had he not done this thing? We won't ever know. Had he not made this choice. Now, let's not forget that David was forgiven, 2 Samuel 12:13. And we are forgiven of our sins, but forgiveness doesn't take away the consequence. Bad choices will follow you sometimes. The choice that David made didn't only affect him, the choices we make don't only affect us. Now let's talk about some statistics. Let's jump to modern times right now. and then we'll get back to David's family. A study from the Office of National Statistics in the United Kingdom says that if you are unfaithful in your marriage, your children are twice as likely to cheat on their spouses as well. And it isn't from a Christian publication, but I believe all of these are to be true, about misconceptions about Christian parenting. Number one, because I am a Christian, my children will be Christians. No, they have to be taught, corrected, trained in the faith that they will believe. My actions will not influence my children's faithfulness. Now, this is a big one. A recent survey showed that where both parents were faithful and active in church, 96% of their children would also be active in church. Only 6% of children remain faithful if parents are sporadic, not involved, just pew warmers. So the old story is true. Children are rarely more faithful than their parents. That's a deep one we have to think about in the church. Number three, my children will naturally show respect and give authority to those in positions of leadership. Now, respect for authority is taught at home. A child who doesn't respect the authority of his mother and father will not respect the authority of Christ, his word, or the leaders of the church. Number four, forcing my children to come to worship, Bible study, or youth activities will make them rebel and hate church. No, some people think that children should decide on their own about their faith, and when they're old enough, they'll make up their own mind. But how can they decide if they've no basis for their decision and haven't been taught? If they're left alone without guidance and a little push now and then, the flesh will always want to avoid worship. And the flesh will win out. Young people should be trained and made to understand that church attendance and involvement are not optional. Parents deserve all the credit or all the blame for the success or failure of their children. That's what some people think. That's what some parents try to put on themselves. We as parents must be consistent on other points we've made and train up our children the best of our ability to love God, to worship Him. But as God made us all free will, in the end, your children are responsible for their own choices and their actions regarding their faith. Now, that being said, let's return back to the life and family of David. Remember that when told of the man who slew the little ewe lamb, David said that the man would surely die and that he would restore fourfold for that lamb that he took. Now, this wasn't David just making this up off the cuff. This was the law. Read Exodus 21 or 22:1. Somebody turn that and read that for me. Somebody be turning to Leviticus 20:10. Exodus 22:1. Whoever gets